Just a few years ago, Zimbabwe's lithium industry was barely on the map. Today, it's a gold mine. Well, a white gold mine to be exact. And now, Europe is in a mad dash to lock in supply deals because without Zimbabwe's lithium, their electric vehicle industry could come to a screeching halt. Let that sink in. A country once overlooked in global trade is now sitting on one of the world's most valuable resources, flipping the script and forcing Europe into negotiations it never expected. But how did this happen so fast? And what does it mean when an African nation suddenly holds a key piece of the puzzle in the world's energy transition? Let's break it down. For over 100 years, fossil fuels ruled the world. Oil, coal and gas-fueled industries powered cities and kept cars on the road. But burning all that fuel came with a price. Climate change, pollution, and a planet heating up faster than ever. Now, governments and corporations are scrambling to clean up their act, setting ambitious targets to cut emissions and switch to renewable energy. Enter lithium, the magic ingredient behind the green revolution. Often called white gold, this lightweight metal is what makes rechargeable batteries work. It's inside your phone, your laptop, and most importantly, electric cars. Without lithium, EVs wouldn't exist, and neither would large-scale battery storage systems that help power cities with clean energy. But here's the problem. The demand for lithium is skyrocketing, and there's simply not enough of it. Car makers like Tesla, BMW, and Volkswagen are racing to produce more electric vehicles. But their biggest roadblock isn't technology. It's the lack of raw materials. And with governments pushing for a future without gas-powered cars, the need for lithium is expected to grow fivefold by 2050. This isn't just about business anymore, it's a global power shift. For the first time in modern history, control over resources isn't just about oil, it's about lithium. And that changes everything. Not too long ago, the world ran on oil. Whoever controlled it had power, not just economic power, but the kind that shaped global politics, built alliances, and even started wars. Countries like the US, Saudi Arabia, and Russia held all the cards, using their oil reserves to influence everything from trade to military strategy. But now there's a new king of the resource world, lithium. Unlike oil, which is spread across different continents, lithium is much harder to find. Only a few countries have it in large amounts, and that scarcity is turning it into one of the most sought-after resources on the planet. As the world shifts toward electric cars and clean energy, lithium has become the key ingredient in the batteries that power this transformation. For years, three players, Australia, Chile, and China, controlled almost all of the global lithium supply. Australia dug it out of the ground, Chile pulled it from salt flats, and China refined and processed most of it into a form usable for batteries. It was a predictable system that kept electric vehicle makers and tech companies stocked with the lithium they needed. But that stability, it didn't last. A series of global disruptions sent shockwaves through the supply chain, forcing major economies to scramble for new sources before they fell behind in the race for clean energy dominance. First, COVID-19 threw everything into chaos. Lockdowns shut down factories, shipping delays left lithium shipments stranded, and supply chains crumbled. Suddenly, automakers, especially in Europe, found themselves unable to get the lithium they needed to keep up with skyrocketing demand for electric cars. Prices shot up, production stalled, and the cracks in the system became impossible to ignore. Then, things got even more complicated. Governments in lithium-rich countries, particularly in Latin America, started changing the rules. In places like Chile and Argentina, leaders pushed for stricter mining policies to ensure their countries benefited more from their own resources. Higher taxes, new regulations and limits on foreign companies made it harder for Western nations to secure long-term lithium deals. Meanwhile, geopolitical tensions kept growing. Trade wars and resource nationalism added even more uncertainty, making it clear that the old system, where a few countries controlled the entire lithium supply, was no longer sustainable. For years, Australia was a powerhouse in the mining world, stable, efficient, and a go-to supplier for critical minerals. But times have changed. Stricter environmental laws, rising extraction costs, and shifting political priorities have made lithium mining in Australia more expensive and complicated than ever. Western companies, once used to a steady and affordable lithium supply, are now facing a harsh reality. Prices are climbing, regulations are getting tighter, and the supply they once took for granted is no longer guaranteed. But that's not the only thing shaking up the lithium market. A much bigger power struggle is at play, and it's pulling the world's biggest economies into a fierce competition. China has quietly built an empire in the lithium industry. While countries like Australia and Chile dig lithium out of the ground, China controls what happens next. It processes about 60% of the world's lithium, turning raw material into battery-grade metal, the kind needed to power everything from electric cars to massive energy storage systems. This gives China an enormous advantage. Even if lithium is mined elsewhere, most of it still has to pass through China before it becomes useful. For Western governments already nervous about China's grip on global trade, this is a major problem. The United States, determined to limit China's technological influence, has started cutting off Chinese battery and semiconductor companies, pushing for new supply chains that don't depend on Beijing. But Europe, it's in a tough spot. Right now, nearly all of Europe's lithium refining happens in China. In fact, Europe relies on China for about 98% of its lithium supply. That's a dangerous level of dependence, especially as trade tensions rise and supply chains become more unpredictable. So, what does Europe do? It starts searching for new sources, places that can provide lithium without the political headaches and supply chain risks. That's where Zimbabwe comes in. For decades, Zimbabwe barely registered in global energy discussions. The country was known for its vast mineral wealth, gold, diamonds, and platinum. But lithium, it wasn't on the radar. Political instability, economic struggles, and Western sanctions made it difficult for Zimbabwe to attract major investment. But now, everything has changed. Zimbabwe isn't just a country with valuable minerals. It's sitting on one of the largest untapped lithium reserves in the world. The world's hunger for lithium is growing fast, and suddenly, Zimbabwe has become impossible to ignore. Deep beneath Zimbabwe's rocky terrain lies one of the most valuable resources of the 21st century: lithium. Unlike other forms of lithium found in salt flats, Zimbabwe's lithium is locked within hard rock deposits, mainly in the form of spodumene and petalite. Why does that matter? Because spodumene is the top choice for making high-quality lithium hydroxide, the type used in powerful electric vehicle batteries, massive energy storage grids, and the latest high-tech gadgets. These lithium-rich sites aren't scattered randomly. They're concentrated in key mining hotspots like Bikita, Arcadia, Zulu, and Kamativi. And as global demand skyrockets, these once overlooked regions are transforming into high-stakes battlegrounds for resource control. Now, companies from China, the US, and Europe are scrambling to secure a piece of the action. They know that Zimbabwe holds something they need to stay ahead in the energy race. For most of its recent history, Zimbabwe has struggled to find its footing in the global economy. Sanctions from Western nations cut it off from trade, foreign investment, and financial markets. Add in years of political instability, runaway inflation, and economic mismanagement, and Zimbabwe found itself trapped in a cycle of hardship. But lithium is changing the game. Gold and diamonds have long been Zimbabwe's top exports, but lithium? That's a different story. This isn't just another mineral, it's a resource that's shaping the future. In the same way that oil powered the 20th century, lithium is fueling the clean energy revolution. For the first time ever, Zimbabwe is holding a resource that the world can't afford to overlook. A decade ago, no one would have guessed that Zimbabwe would play a crucial role in the race for clean energy. But today, as global superpowers rush to lock in lithium deals, Zimbabwe is no longer sitting on the sidelines. The world is waking up to a new reality. Zimbabwe isn't just sitting on valuable resources, it has something even more powerful: leverage. The real question now isn't whether Zimbabwe will become a major player in the lithium market, it's what the country will do with its newfound influence. Because right now, Europe is desperate for lithium, and Zimbabwe has more than enough to go around. For years, Europe had a simple playbook when it came to lithium. They sourced raw materials from Australia and South America, sent them off to China for processing, and got back refined lithium ready for use in electric vehicles and batteries. It was a smooth operation, until it wasn't. With demand for lithium surging and global tensions heating up, that system is no longer working. Here's why. First, China has tightened its grip on lithium exports, keeping more of the refined material for its own industries. Since China controls over 60% of the world's lithium refining, that means one thing: bottlenecks. If China decides to limit supply, the rest of the world feels the squeeze. Europe, which heavily relies on China for processed lithium, suddenly finds itself in a risky position. Second, the race to cut dependence on a single supplier has forced European leaders to rethink their entire approach. With strict climate goals pushing for rapid electrification under the EU's Green Deal, the continent needs a steady and secure lithium supply, or risk falling behind. Third, disruptions everywhere, from the COVID-19 pandemic to global shipping chaos to instability in Latin America, have made lithium prices unpredictable. European automakers and battery manufacturers are already feeling the pressure, and the urgency to find new suppliers is growing by the day. So, where do they turn? Africa, more specifically Zimbabwe, a country that, until recently, wasn't even in the conversation when it came to powering the future. But now everything is different. Zimbabwe is sitting on some of the world's richest lithium deposits, and for the first time ever, European nations find themselves relying on an African country for a resource they can't do without. This flips the usual script. For decades, African nations have depended on Western investment, aid, and trade deals shaped by outside interests. But now, the tables have turned. Europe needs Zimbabwe's lithium, and that means negotiations will have to happen on Zimbabwe's terms. This isn't just about selling minerals, it's about rewriting the rules. Unlike the past, when raw materials were shipped out at low prices, Zimbabwe is making a bold move. By banning the export of unprocessed lithium, the country is forcing foreign investors to set up refining and processing facilities inside Zimbabwe, keeping more of the value chain at home. The question now isn't just whether Zimbabwe can supply lithium, it's whether this resource will finally transform its economy, or just become another missed opportunity. For years, Africa has been stuck in a cycle, digging up valuable resources, selling them for cheap, and then buying back expensive finished products made from those same materials. It's a system that has drained wealth from the continent instead of building it. But Zimbabwe is trying to change that. The real question is, will it work? History has shown that having valuable resources doesn't always lead to prosperity. Countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and Venezuela sit on massive reserves of precious minerals, yet they've struggled with corruption, mismanagement, and foreign exploitation. Instead of lifting their economies, resource wealth has often fueled instability. Zimbabwe is determined to break that pattern. Rather than just shipping out raw lithium, the government is demanding that companies refine it inside the country. The goal? To move up the value chain. Instead of exporting unprocessed ore, Zimbabwe wants to produce high-value lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide, the key ingredients for electric vehicle batteries. This isn't just about earning more money per ton of lithium. It's about creating jobs, boosting local industries, and keeping more wealth circulating within Zimbabwe instead of letting it flow overseas. But is refining lithium enough? Right now, Africa is one of the world's richest sources of lithium, yet it has zero major battery manufacturing plants. Meanwhile, China, Japan, South Korea, and the US dominate the production of lithium-ion batteries. Every electric car, smartphone, and renewable energy storage system depends on these batteries, but Africa plays no role in making them, yet. Zimbabwe has a rare opportunity to change that. If the country can attract the right investments, forge smart partnerships, and build a battery industry of its own, it could become a major supplier. Not just of lithium, but of batteries for Africa and beyond. That would be a complete game changer. Imagine a Zimbabwe that doesn't just export lithium, but manufactures the batteries that power electric vehicles and renewable energy grids. This wouldn't just bring in more revenue, it would create thousands of high-paying jobs, drive innovation, and position Zimbabwe as a leader in Africa's clean energy revolution. And Zimbabwe has one major advantage: global competition. Powerful countries are racing to secure lithium supplies, and Zimbabwe is right at the center of this battle. Right now, Zimbabwe is caught between two powerful forces. China has already planted its flag in the country's lithium sector, pouring money into mining operations and locking down supply deals. Meanwhile, Europe is scrambling to secure a steady lithium source that doesn't come with strings attached to Beijing. This puts Zimbabwe in a rare and powerful position. For the first time in modern history, it has the leverage to set its own terms. In the past, African nations were often backed into unfair trade agreements, forced to accept whatever deal was offered. But now, the rules of the game are changing. With both China and Europe eager to secure its lithium, Zimbabwe has the chance to negotiate from a place of strength. By carefully balancing these competing interests, Zimbabwe could maximise its profits, attract infrastructure investment, and build long-term economic stability, something that resource-rich African nations have historically struggled to achieve. But this shift isn't just about lithium. It exposes a deeper truth, one that Western nations have avoided acknowledging for decades. For too long, Africa's role in the global economy has been carefully downplayed. The West built its industries, fueled its technological growth, and maintained its dominance using Africa's resources. Yet it framed African nations as dependent on foreign aid rather than as critical suppliers of raw materials. Now, that illusion is crumbling. With lithium supplies from other sources becoming harder to secure, Western nations are being forced to face reality. Their clean energy ambitions rely on Africa. And this time, they can't hide it behind corporate middlemen or one-sided trade policies. They have to negotiate openly and on equal footing. For Zimbabwe, this is more than just an economic opportunity. It's a moment of reckoning. For the first time, an African nation isn't being treated as an afterthought in global trade. It's being recognised as an essential player. The balance of power is shifting. The question now is whether Africa can turn this moment into lasting economic transformation, or if history will repeat itself once again.